The cruiser Quiet Passage drifted through the cold emptiness of space like a wounded animal searching for shelter. Commander Al stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the damage reports appear on his screen one after another. Each new report made his heart sink a little deeper into his chest. 3 of the ship's 12 decks were completely open to space. The emergency barriers had sealed those sections, but everything inside them was gone. Crew quarters, storage rooms, the secondary medical bay, all of it had been sucked out into the void when the raiders had torn through their hull with plasma weapons. The primary drive core was barely working. It should have been running at full power, pushing them through space at speeds that would make light itself jealous. Instead, it coughed and sputtered like an old ground vehicle, giving them only 12% of its normal output. At this rate, it would take them months to reach any friendly port. Half of their weapons were completely dead. The other half were damaged so badly that firing them might cause more harm to the Quiet Passage than to any enemy. Their shields were holding at perhaps 20% strength. One more serious attack would finish them. Al was a tall being, even by standards. His skin was the deep blue color of a twilight sky, and his 4 eyes were arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. 2 of those eyes were focused on the damage reports. The other 2 were watching his crew as they worked at their stations. They were scared. He could see it in the way they moved, in the tension of their shoulders, in the quick glances they kept throwing at the viewports as if expecting ships to appear at any moment. They had lost friends in the attack. Good people who had served aboard this ship for years. They did not cry as some species did, but Al could feel the grief hanging in the recycled air like a physical weight. His second officer approached from across the bridge. Lieutenant N was younger than Al by several decades, but she had proven herself capable and intelligent during her time aboard the Quiet Passage. Her silver skin had taken on a grayish color that Al recognized immediately. It was the sign of extreme stress, of fear that went beyond the ordinary. She held a tablet computer against her chest, as if it might protect her from the universe. "Commander," she said in a voice that was almost steady, "I have completed the analysis you requested. We have reviewed all possible destinations within our remaining fuel range." Al nodded slowly. He had known this report was coming. He had been dreading it. "Tell me," he said. N looked down at her tablet, then back up at him. "There are 7 star systems we can reach before our fuel runs out. 4 of them have no permanent settlements. 1 belongs to the collective, and they would likely impound our ship and hold us for ransom. 1 belongs to the Merchant Guild of Telos, but their repair facilities cannot handle military vessels." She paused, and Al felt his secondary heart begin to beat faster. "And the 7th?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Sol 3, N confirmed. The human, the planet they call Earth." A murmur rippled through the bridge crew. Several of them turned to look at each other with expressions of uncertainty. The communications officer, a young male named O, actually dropped his stylus and had to scramble to pick it up. Al understood their reaction. They had encountered humans only twice before in the Grand Council meetings that brought together representatives from dozens of spacefaring species. Both times, the human delegates had been strange and difficult to understand. They were a young species by galactic standards. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 300 years ago, which was practically yesterday in terms of cosmic history. They had been exploring the stars for over 4,000 years. The ancient species like thee and the endless singers had been spacefaring for tens of thousands of years. And yet the humans had spread across the galaxy with a speed that made even the oldest species nervous. They colonized worlds that others considered too dangerous or too remote. They built ships that were massive and bristling with weapons. They seemed to have no fear of anything, which was either admirable or deeply concerning depending on who you asked. Some council members called them reckless. They took risks that more sensible species would never consider. They pushed into unknown territory without proper surveys. They experimented with technologies that could have killed them all. Others called them innovative. Their ships were not elegant, but they were effective. Their scientists made breakthroughs that more established species had failed to achieve after centuries of research. They found solutions to problems that everyone else had given up on. A few council members, speaking in hushed voices when they thought no one was listening, called humans terrifying. Al had never understood why. They seemed like unremarkable mammals from an unremarkable world. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a roughly symmetrical body plan that was common across thousands of species. Nothing special. But those whispered conversations had stuck in his memory. There was something about humans that made other species uneasy, though no one seemed able to explain exactly what it was. "Commander," N prompted gently. Al realized he had been standing in silence for nearly a full minute. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. They needed him to lead them, to make the hard decisions that came with command. "How long to reach Earth?" he asked. N checked her tablet. "At our current speed, approximately 6 days. If we push the engines any harder, we risk complete drive failure." 6 days, 6 days of limping through space in a broken ship, hoping they did not find them again. 6 days of watching their supplies dwindle and their systems fail one by one. It was a long time to be vulnerable. But it was better than the alternative. "Set course for Earth," Al ordered. His voice came out steady and strong, which surprised him a little. "Transmit a standard distress signal on all frequencies. Make clear that we come in peace and require only repairs. Include our ship registration and my command codes." "Yes, Commander," O replied, his fingers already moving across his console. "N," Al continued, turning to his second officer. "I want damage control teams working around the clock. Focus on life support and propulsion. Everything else is secondary." "Understood, Commander." "And N," he waited until she met his eyes. "Tell the crew that help is coming. Tell them we are going to make it through this." She nodded, and some of the gray color faded from her skin. "I will tell them, Commander." The quiet passage turned slowly, its damaged maneuvering thrusters struggling to orient the ship toward its new destination. Somewhere ahead, hidden by the vast distances of space, was a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star. Al had never seen Earth with his own eyes. He had only read about it in reports and seen images captured by long-range probes. It looked like a pleasant world, mostly water with patches of green and brown land scattered across its surface. The humans had polluted it badly before they discovered how to leave, but they had spent the last few centuries cleaning up their mess. Now it was supposed to be quite beautiful. Al hoped he would get the chance to see it up close. The first 3 days of travel were the hardest. The quiet passage groaned and creaked as it moved through space, its damaged hull protesting every slight course correction. The engineering teams worked without rest, patching holes and rerouting power, and doing everything they could to keep the ship alive. Al slept only in short bursts, never more than an hour or 2 at a time. He walked the corridors of his ship constantly, checking on his crew, offering words of encouragement, helping with repairs when he could. He was not an engineer by training, but he had commanded this ship for 15 years. He knew every system, every quirk, every weakness. On the second day, they lost artificial gravity on Deck 7. The crew working there had to strap themselves to the walls to keep working. On the third day, the water recycling system began to fail, and they had to start rationing drinks. On the fourth day, one of the backup power generators exploded, killing 2 engineers and injuring 5 more. Al attended the memorial service for the dead. He spoke the traditional words of farewell, sending their spirits to join the great river of existence. Then he went back to work, because stopping was not an option. By the 5th day, they received a response to their distress signal. Al was on the bridge when the communication came through. He had been staring at the navigation display, watching their painfully slow progress toward Earth, when O suddenly sat up in his chair. "Commander," the communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission. It is using standard galactic protocols, but the encryption is human." "Put it through," Al ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice emerged. It was speaking Galactic Common, the shared language used for communication between species, but the accent was unmistakably human. The sounds were sharper, more clipped, than Al was used to hearing. Vessel Quiet Passage, this is Captain Danny of the Earth Defense Ship Starling. We received your distress call and have been monitoring your approach. Please hold your current position and prepare to receive an escort. We will be with you in approximately 4 hours. Al felt relief wash over him like a wave of warm water. An escort meant they would not be turned away. An escort meant help was actually coming. "Oh, respond to their message," he said. "Tell them we are grateful for their assistance and will comply with their instructions. Send our current status and damage reports so they know what to expect." "Yes, Commander." Al allowed himself to sit down in his command chair for the first time in days. His body ached with exhaustion, and his eyes were dry and scratchy from lack of sleep. But they were going to make it. They were actually going to make it. The 4 hours passed slowly. Al used the time to clean himself up, eating a small meal and changing into a fresh uniform. If he was going to meet humans for the first time, he wanted to make a good impression. He also ordered his senior officers to do the same. En appeared on the bridge looking much better than she had in days. Her silver skin had returned to its normal healthy sheen, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. "The crew's morale has improved dramatically," she reported. "Knowing that help is coming has made all the difference." "Good," Al said. "Let us hope the humans are as helpful as their message suggested." "Commander," O interrupted, "I am detecting an incoming vessel. It is approaching at high speed from the direction of Earth." "On screen," Al ordered. The main flickered and changed, showing a section of empty space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then there was a flash of light, the characteristic signature of a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel, and a vessel appeared. Al felt his secondary heart skip a beat. The human ship was massive, not merely large by standards, but genuinely enormous. It was easily 3 times the size of the Quiet Passage, and the Quiet Passage was considered a major warship by military standards. The human vessel's hull was dark gray, almost black, and it was covered in angular armor plates that looked thick enough to withstand a direct nuclear strike. But it was the weapons that made Al's blood run cold. The ship bristled with weapon arrays. Missile launchers, energy projectors, point defense systems, things that Al could not even identify. There were so many weapons that the ship's hull was barely visible beneath them. It looked less like a spacecraft and more like a fortress that had somehow learned to fly. "That is an escort vessel," En whispered beside him. "Apparently," Al replied, unable to keep the unease from his voice. The communication system activated again and Captain's voice filled the bridge. "Quiet Passage, this is Starling. We have visual contact with your ship. Damn, you folks have been through hell. Don't worry, we'll get you fixed up. Fall in behind us and match our speed. We'll have you at Earth Orbital Station 7 in about 20 hours. Al found his voice. "Thank you, Captain. We are grateful for your assistance." "Happy to help out." The massive human warship turned gracefully, moving with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for something so large. It took up position ahead of the Quiet Passage and began to move toward Earth at a pace that was clearly meant to accommodate their damaged engines. As they followed the Starling through space, Al found himself studying the human ship on his displays. The technical readouts were fascinating and more than a little disturbing. The Starling was not just heavily armed. It was also fast, far faster than any ship of comparable size. Its shields were powerful enough to shrug off weapons that would have crippled the Quiet Passage even before the attack. Its sensors could detect objects at ranges that the military considered impossible. This was an escort ship, a single vessel sent to guide a damaged cruiser to port, and it was more powerful than anything in the Navy. What did their real warships look like? The question haunted Al for the rest of the journey. He tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to the image of the Starling with all its weapons and armor. He tried to eat, but the food tasted like ash in his mouth. He tried to focus on his duties, but his thoughts kept wandering. En noticed his distraction. She came to him late in the evening cycle when most of the crew was resting. "You are troubled, Commander," she said. It was not a question. Al nodded slowly. "I am trying to understand these humans. We have always been told they are a young species, barely worth noticing in the grand scheme of galactic politics. But that ship out there, the Starling, it is more powerful than our finest warships. Perhaps they have dedicated more resources to military development than we have, N suggested. Perhaps, Al agreed. But there is something else, something I cannot quite identify. When I look at that ship, I feel not fear exactly. It is more like awe or maybe recognition. Recognition of what? Al thought about the question for a long moment. Of what we could have been perhaps, of what we might still become. The humans have something that we lost a long time ago. A fire, a drive, a refusal to accept limits. We have become comfortable with our place in the galaxy. They are still hungry. N was quiet for a while, then she said, "Is that a bad thing?" "I do not know," Al admitted. "Ask me again after we have spent some time among them." The 20 hours passed faster than Al expected. He found himself actually enjoying the journey, watching the Starling move through space with graceful power. Captain checked in periodically, asking about their status and offering words of encouragement. He seemed genuinely concerned about their welfare, which was surprising. Al had expected humans to be cold and businesslike. As they approached Earth's solar system, more ships joined them. At first it was just a few vessels, small patrol craft that fell into formation around the quiet passage like protective guardians. Then came larger ships, destroyers and frigates with sleek hulls and impressive weapon arrays. By the time they reached the outer planets of the solar system, there were dozens of ships surrounding them. Al watched the tactical display with growing amazement. Every single one of these vessels was armed. Every single one was powerful, and they were treating this like a routine escort mission. "Commander," O said, his voice strained, "I am detecting additional vessels ahead, many additional vessels." "How many?" Al asked. O swallowed hard. "Hundreds, Commander, possibly thousands." The shifted to show their destination, and Al finally understood why some species called humans terrifying. Earth hung in the void like a blue and white jewel, beautiful beyond description. But it was not the planet that made Al's breath catch in his throat. It was what surrounded the planet. Ships, hundreds upon hundreds of ships. They orbited Earth in layers, like shells around a precious core. The smallest were patrol craft no bigger than shuttles. The largest were dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Starling, massive constructs of metal and power that looked capable of destroying worlds. And between the ships were stations, enormous orbital platforms bristling with docks and facilities and weapons. They formed a ring around the planet, connected by streams of shuttle traffic and cargo transports. "By the great river," N breathed. "This is a fortress. They have turned their entire into a fortress." Al could not speak. He could only stare at the display, trying to process what he was seeing. The entire Navy consisted of perhaps 600 vessels spread across 30 star systems. Here, around a single planet, the humans had gathered a fleet that outnumbered the entire military several times over. And this was just there. They had colonies on dozens of other planets, each presumably with its own defenses. What had the humans been preparing for? What enemy could possibly require this kind of firepower? Captain's voice came through the speakers again, cheerful and casual as always. "Welcome to Earth, quiet passage. Pretty sight, isn't she? We're heading for Orbital Station 7, the big one at 2 o'clock from your current position. The repair teams are already standing by." "Thank you, Captain," Al managed to say. "Your home is very impressive." Laughed, "Wait until you see the coffee. Out." Coffee, Al had heard of this human beverage, though he had never tried it. He made a mental note to ask about it later. Right now, he was too overwhelmed to think about anything except the sheer scale of what he was witnessing. The Starling guided them through the layers of ships with practiced ease. They passed carrier groups and patrol squadrons, supply convoys and construction platforms. Everywhere Al looked, there were humans working, building, preparing. It was like watching an entire civilization in motion. Earth Orbital Station 7 grew larger as they approached. It was one of the bigger platforms in orbit, a massive structure of metal and glass that gleamed in the sunlight. Dozens of ships were docked at its arms, including several that looked as damaged as the quiet passage. "They repair many vessels here," En observed. "It appears so," Al agreed. "I wonder if they help everyone who comes to them or just those they consider allies." "We are about to find out." The docking process was smooth and professional. Human controllers guided them into position with clear, precise instructions. Docking clamps locked onto their hull with gentle precision, and umbilical connections extended to provide power and life support. Within minutes, the quiet passage was securely attached to the station. Through the viewports, Al could see teams of workers in environmental suits assembling near the docking clamps. They moved with quick, efficient purpose, carrying tools and equipment that he did not recognize. Some of them were already examining the damaged sections of his ship's hull, pointing and discussing what they saw. "Commander," En said, "we have received a request to open our primary airlock. A human delegation is waiting to meet us." Al stood up and straightened his uniform. "Open the airlock, let us go and meet our hosts." He walked through the corridors of his ship with En beside him, passing crew members who nodded respectfully as he went by. They all looked better than they had during the journey, rested and hopeful and curious about what awaited them. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, revealing a short corridor that connected the quiet passage to the station. At the far end of the corridor, a group of humans was waiting. Al had seen images of humans before, but seeing them in person was different. They were smaller than, most of them barely reaching his chest in height. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink, and their hair grew in colors ranging from black to yellow to gray. The human at the front of the group was a woman, short and compact with dark hair pulled back in a practical style. Her eyes were a warm brown color, and they crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She was wearing a simple uniform with patches on the shoulders that Al assumed indicated her rank or position. "Commander Al?" she asked, stepping forward with her hand extended. Al had studied human customs enough to know what the gesture meant. He reached out and clasped her hand briefly, surprised by the warmth of her skin. "I am Commander Al," he confirmed. "This is my second officer, Lieutenant En." "Welcome to Earth Orbital Station 7, the woman said. "I'm Chief Engineer Maria Santos. These are my colleagues." She gestured at the other humans behind her, rattling off names that Al tried to remember. There was Pete, a young man with pale skin and hair the color of rust. Lisa, a tall woman with dark skin and a serious expression. Park, a shorter man with black hair and an eager smile. "We've already begun preliminary scans of your ship," Maria continued. "Mind if we take a closer look? I'd like to see the damage firsthand." Al nodded. "Of course, I will give you a full tour." For the next several hours, Maria and her team walked through the quiet passage with Al and En. They examined everything: the damaged hull sections, the struggling drive core, the failed weapon systems, the broken life support units. At each stop, they asked questions, took notes, and discussed possible solutions among themselves. Al was impressed by their knowledge. They understood technology far better than he had expected. Maria, in particular, seemed to grasp the principles behind their systems with alarming speed. "Your drive core is based on quantum field manipulation," she said at one point, peering into an access panel. "Similar to our Mark IV engines, but with a different harmonic configuration. Interesting. I think we can work with this." "You are familiar with our technology?" Al asked, surprised. Maria shrugged. "We make it our business to understand how things work. Never know when you might need to help someone or defend yourself against them. Knowledge is power, right?" There was nothing threatening in her tone, but Al felt a small chill run down his spine nonetheless. The humans did not just build weapons. They studied, they learned, they prepared. Pete proved to be particularly impressive. While the others were still discussing the drive core, he had crawled into a maintenance duct that engineers had declared inaccessible. Al could hear him moving around inside the ship's guts, accompanied by occasional grunts and metallic clanking sounds. "Found your problem?" Pete's voice echoed through the... "You've got a fractured coolant manifold feeding into a cracked plasma conduit. That's why your drive efficiency went to hell." The coolant leak is contaminating your plasma flow, creating turbulence in the quantum field. Give me about 6 hours and I'll have it better than new. Better than new, Al repeated. Maria grinned at him. Pete doesn't really know how to do standard repairs. He gets bored. Hope you don't mind if your ship ends up about 15% more efficient than it was before the damage. Al did not know how to respond to that. 15% more efficient. That would make the quiet passage faster than any other ship in the Navy. A simple repair mission would transform his vessel into one of the most advanced cruisers his people had ever operated. I am certain that would be acceptable, he managed to say. Maria's grin widened. Great, let's go take a look at your weapons systems. The tour continued for another 2 hours. Maria and her team examined every part of the quiet passage, taking detailed notes and discussing repair options. By the end, Al's head was spinning with technical specifications and projected improvements. When they finally returned to the main airlock, Maria pulled out a tablet and began entering information. Okay, here's what we're looking at, she said. Full hull repairs, drive core overhaul, weapons system restoration, and general systems upgrade. I'd estimate about 5 days for everything, maybe 6 if we run into any surprises. Sound good? That is much faster than I expected, Al admitted. Repair facilities would require at least 3 weeks for this level of damage. Yeah, well, we've got more hands and better tools. Plus, we kind of enjoy a challenge. Maria looked up from her tablet and met his eyes. There's one thing I should mention, Commander. We don't actually charge for emergency repairs. It's considered a public service. You don't owe us anything. Al stared at her. Nothing. You will repair my ship, improve its systems, and ask for nothing in return. That's right, though I wouldn't say no if you wanted to join us for dinner sometime. I'd love to hear about culture, and I bet you have questions about Earth. Al thought about the massive fleet in orbit, the powerful ships, the advanced technology. He thought about the warmth in Maria's eyes and the casual way she offered help to strangers. Yes, he said slowly, I believe I have many questions about Earth. Maria smiled. Then let's find you some quarters and get you settled in. The repair teams will start work first thing tomorrow. Tonight you should rest. You look like you haven't slept in days. She was right. Al was exhausted in ways he had not allowed himself to acknowledge. The stress of the attack, the desperate journey, the constant worry had all taken their toll. Thank you, he said, and meant it more than he had meant anything in a long time. Thank you for everything. Maria reached out and patted his arm gently. That's what neighbors are for, Commander. Welcome to Earth. The quarters they provided were comfortable and well-appointed. The bed was strange, designed for human bodies rather than one's, but Al was too tired to care. He lay down and was asleep within minutes, falling into the deepest rest he had experienced in weeks. He dreamed of stars and ships, and a small blue planet surrounded by lights. When Al woke, it was to the sound of activity outside his door. He could hear human voices speaking rapidly, along with the hum of machinery and the occasional clang of metal on metal. The repairs had begun. He cleaned himself using the facilities in his quarters, which had been thoughtfully adjusted to accommodate physiology. Someone had done research before his arrival. Someone had prepared. En was waiting for him in the corridor outside. She looked better than she had since the attack, her silver skin bright and her posture relaxed. Good morning, Commander, she said. I trust you slept well. Surprisingly well, Al admitted. What is our status? The human repair teams have been working for approximately 6 hours. They started at what they call dawn shift and have made remarkable progress. En handed him a tablet with repair reports. They have already sealed the hull breaches on decks 3, 7, and 9. They are currently working on the drive core. Al scanned the reports, his eyes widening as he read. The humans were not just repairing the damage. They were improving everything they touched. Hull sections were being reinforced with stronger materials. Power systems were being optimized for better efficiency. Even the simple repairs were being done with a level of precision that exceeded military standards. This is remarkable, he said. It is, En agreed. I have been watching them work. Their methods are different from ours, more direct and less concerned with traditional procedures, but they are effective. They walked through the station toward the quiet passage, passing humans who nodded politely as they went by. The station was busy, full of people moving with purpose and energy. Al saw workers and soldiers and civilians, all mixed together in a way that would have been unusual on an installation. When they reached the ship, Al found Maria Santos already there, supervising a team that was installing new armor plating on the outer hull. "Commander," she called out cheerfully, "good timing, come see what we're doing." Al walked over and looked at the armor plating. It was different from materials, darker and denser, with a faint crystalline structure visible in the metal. "This is composite armor," Maria explained. "It's about 30% stronger than what you had before, and it's self-sealing. If you take a hit that penetrates the outer layer, the inner layer will automatically close the breach. Should give you a lot more survivability in a fight." "This is standard repair material?" Al asked, surprised. "Standard for military vessels, yeah. We don't see much point in just putting things back the way they were. If you're going to fix something, you might as well make it better." It was such a simple philosophy, but it contained something profound. The humans did not accept the limitations of what existed. They always pushed for improvement, for progress, for better. It was the same drive that Al had sensed in their ships and their technology. "I would like to observe the repairs," he said, "if that is acceptable." "Of course, just stay out of the way of the heavy equipment and don't touch anything that's sparking." Al spent the next several hours watching the human repair teams work. He saw Pete emerge from the maintenance ducts covered in grease and grinning like a child who had just received a gift. He saw Lisa carefully recalibrating the weapon's targeting systems, her fingers moving with surgical precision. He saw Park running back and forth with supplies and messages, never seeming to slow down or tire. They worked together with a coordination that was almost musical. Each person knew their role and performed it without hesitation. When problems arose, they solved them quickly, often improvising solutions on the spot. When someone needed help, others jumped in without being asked. It was different from how worked. His people valued hierarchy and procedure, careful planning and methodical execution. The humans valued results. They did whatever was necessary to get the job done, even if it meant breaking rules or inventing new methods. And they talked constantly, not just about work, but about everything. Their families, their hobbies, their favorite foods, their plans for the future. Al heard Pete discussing a sport called baseball with one of his colleagues. He heard Lisa mention a book she was reading about ancient human history. He heard talk about his sister's wedding, which was happening next month. They were not just workers. They were people with full lives and complex interests. And somehow, knowing that made Al respect them even more. By the end of the day, the quiet passage looked like a different ship. The hull was smooth and whole, gleaming with new armor. The drive core hummed with steady power, already running more efficiently than it ever had before. The weapons systems were coming online one by one, each one more accurate and powerful than the original. Maria found Al on the observation deck, watching the sun set behind the curve of Earth. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, coming to stand beside him. "It is," Al agreed. "I have seen many planets in my career, but there is something special about this one. Home usually feels special, even if you've traveled to 1,000 other worlds." They stood in silence for a while, watching the light play across the planet's surface. Clouds swirled in great patterns over the oceans. Lights began to appear on the dark side as cities woke for the evening. "May I ask you a question?" Al said eventually. "Of course." "Why do you help us? They have nothing to offer Earth. We are not powerful or wealthy. We have no strategic resources or advanced technology. We are just a small civilization trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Why would humans care about our problems?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful and serious. "A few hundred years ago, we were alone," she said. "Or we thought we were, just one species on one planet looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone else was out there. We had our problems, our wars, our struggles, but we were together in a way. We were all we had." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that Al had not seen before. Something deep and powerful. Then we discovered we weren't alone. We went out into space and found other species, other civilizations. Some of them were friendly. Some of them were not. We learned very quickly that the galaxy could be a dangerous place. I understand, Al said. It is a hard lesson. It is, but here's the thing, Commander. We didn't just learn to be afraid. We didn't just build walls and hide behind them. We learned that we had a choice. We could look at every alien species as a potential threat, or we could look at them as potential friends. She gestured at the planet below them. Everything you see here, the ships, the stations, the defenses, we built that to protect ourselves. But we also built it to protect others. Because somewhere along the way, we decided that being alone was the real danger. That isolation and fear would destroy us faster than any enemy. So you help strangers, Al said slowly, because you do not want to be alone. Because we remember what it felt like, Maria agreed. And because we believe that kindness and cooperation are worth more than suspicion and hostility. It's not always easy. It doesn't always work, but it's who we want to be. Al thought about her words for a long time. He thought about the scattered across their 30 star systems, struggling against enemies like the... He thought about how often his people had refused help from others, preferring to suffer alone rather than appear weak. Had that been wisdom, or had it been a different kind of fear? I think I begin to understand, he said finally. Thank you for explaining. Maria smiled. Thank you for listening. Now are you hungry? There's a place on the station that serves food from about 40 different planets. I bet they have something you'd like. Al found himself smiling back. That sounds wonderful. They walked off the observation deck together, leaving Earth shining behind them like a promise of better things to come. The next few days passed in a blur of activity and conversation. Al watched as his ship was transformed from a battered wreck into something that gleamed with power and potential. He talked with the human repair teams, learning about their lives and their work. He explored the station, marveling at its size and complexity. And he drank coffee. The first time Maria offered him a cup of the dark liquid, Al was skeptical. It smelled strange, bitter, and slightly burned. But he accepted it out of politeness and took a cautious sip. The taste was odd, yes, but there was something pleasant underneath the bitterness, a richness and depth that he had not expected. And within minutes he felt more alert than he had in days. His thoughts seemed clearer, his energy higher. This is remarkable, he admitted, taking another sip. Maria laughed. Welcome to humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization. We've got other things too, you know, art, music, literature. But honestly, coffee might be our most important invention. From that moment on, Al was a convert. He drank coffee every morning and sometimes in the afternoon. He tried different varieties, learning about the regions on Earth where the beans were grown and the different methods of preparation. He even started to develop preferences. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it felt significant. It felt like the beginning of a connection. On the third day of repairs, Park came to find Al with an invitation. Hey, Commander, the young man said cheerfully. Admiral heard you were here. She wants to meet you. Would you be willing to come to the command center? Al's secondary heart beat faster at the mention of an admiral. He had been dealing with engineers and technicians, but this was different. An admiral meant high command, serious business. Of course, he said, I would be honored. Led him through the station to a section that was clearly more secure than the areas he had visited before. Armed guards stood at the entrances, and everyone he passed wore crisp uniforms with insignia of rank. The command center was a massive room filled with displays and workstations. Officers moved between consoles, monitoring reports and issuing orders. At the center of it all, on a raised platform, stood a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the people around her. Admiral Grace was older than most of the humans Al had met, with lines on her face that spoke of experience and wisdom. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced many challenges and overcome them all. Commander Al, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. I've been wanting to meet you. Al clasped her hand briefly. The honor is mine, Admiral. I am grateful for all that your people have done for us. Happy to help. Please have a seat. She gestured to a chair beside hers. I understand your ship was attacked in the nebula. I'd like to hear about that if you're willing to share. Al sat down, feeling suddenly nervous. The Admiral's eyes were sharp and intelligent, and he had the sense that she was evaluating him with every word he spoke. We were on a routine patrol mission, he began, checking trade routes for signs of raider activity. There have been a problem in that region for several years. The Grace repeated, Tell me about them. And so Al did. He told her about the savage species that had emerged from the outer reaches of the galaxy a decade ago. He told her about their brutal raids, their destruction of peaceful ships and colonies. He told her about the 17 vessels that had been lost, the 2,000 crew members who had died. He told her about the attack on the Quiet Passage, the plasma fire that had torn through their hull, the desperate flight that had brought them to Earth. When he finished, Grace was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes had not left his face during the entire account. Commander, she said finally, would you be willing to show me exactly where the base is located? We've been tracking their movements for a while, but specific coordinates would be helpful. Al felt a chill run down his spine. The way she asked the question, the look in her eyes, suggested something more than idle curiosity. Of course, he said, I can provide all of our navigation data. Grace nodded slowly. Good. I think we need to have a longer conversation about but first let me show you something. She stood and walked to a massive holographic display that dominated one wall of the command center. With a gesture, she activated it, and a map of the region appeared. This is our real-time threat assessment network, Grace explained. It tracks every potentially hostile vessel within 50 light-years of Earth. The display showed dozens of red markers scattered across the region. Some were single ships, others were clusters moving together in formation. Al studied them with growing unease. Then he saw it, a large cluster of red markers near the nebula. Those markings, he said slowly. The cluster near the nebula, those are raiders. Grace nodded. We've been tracking that group for about 2 months now. Nasty bunch. They hit a convoy of ours last year, killed 43 people. Al stared at the display. You have been watching them. Watching and waiting. We don't start fights, Commander, but we don't forget when someone hurts our people. Grace's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Is that where your ship was attacked? Al could only nod. Grace turned to one of her officers. Get me a full tactical analysis of the region. I want fleet dispositions, supply lines, everything. She looked back at Al. Commander, I'd like to call a meeting with my senior staff. I think we have some planning to do. Within an hour, Al found himself in a conference room with Admiral and a half-dozen other high-ranking human officers. They sat around a large table, studying displays of the nebula and the positions. Let me make sure I understand the situation, Grace said calmly. They have established a raiding base in the nebula. They've been attacking shipping for how long? 3 years, Al admitted, feeling shame heat his face. We have lost 17 vessels and over 2,000 crew members. Our military has been unable to dislodge them. The nebula provides them with cover, and their ships are faster and more heavily armed than ours. Grace exchanged a look with her colleagues. Something passed between them in that glance, some unspoken communication that Al could not interpret. Commander, Grace said, turning back to him, how would you feel about some company on your trip home? Al blinked. I am not sure I understand. Let me be more direct. We've been looking for an excuse to deal with for a while now. Your situation provides a legitimate reason for us to get involved. With your permission, we'd like to send a fleet with you back to space and help you clean out that nest of raiders. For a long moment, Al could not speak. He thought of the massive ships he had seen in orbit around Earth. He thought of the Starling, a mere escort vessel, more powerful than anything in the Navy. He thought of all the people they had killed. Admiral, he said slowly, such help would be gratefully accepted. But I must ask, why would you do this? They are our enemies, not yours. Why would Earth involve itself in our conflict? Grace leaned back in her chair and studied him for a moment. Let me tell you something about humans, Commander. We don't like bullies. We've had plenty of our own throughout history, and we've learned the hard way what happens when you let them operate unchecked. They attacked your people. They attacked our people. They're probably attacking other species we haven't even met yet. Her eyes hardened. Someone needs to teach them that actions have consequences. We've got the capability. We've got the justification. And now, with your request, we've got the invitation. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'd say it's time to go hunting. The conference continued for several more hours. Plans were made, resources allocated, commanders assigned. Al watched in amazement as the humans organized a major military operation with casual efficiency, treating it like just another task to be completed. By the time the meeting ended, a fleet of over 200 warships had been designated for the mission. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, support vessels. More firepower than they had ever been able to bring against the. And it would all be ready to depart in less than 3 days. Al walked back to his quarters in a daze. He had come to Earth seeking repairs for a damaged ship. He was leaving with an armada. En was waiting for him. She took one look at his face and knew something significant had happened. Commander, what is wrong? Nothing is wrong, Al said slowly. Everything is very, very right, and I need you to contact our government. Tell them that help is coming. Help? What kind of help? Al thought about the fleet assembling in orbit. He thought about Admiral and her cold determination. He thought about all the humans he had met, their warmth and their competence and their terrifying capability. The kind of help, he said, that changes everything. The quiet passage was ready to depart on schedule. Its hull gleamed with new armor, its engines hummed with improved power, its weapons stood ready and deadly. It was not the same ship that had limped into Earth's solar system a week ago. It was something better, something stronger. And it would not be traveling alone. Al stood on the observation deck, watching as the human fleet finished its assembly. 200 warships, arranged in perfect formation, waiting for the order to depart. At their head was the dreadnought Perseverance, Admiral flagship. It was the largest warship Al had ever seen, a mountain of metal and firepower that seemed to dwarf everything around it. Maria Santos found him there, as she so often did. Ready to go home? She asked. I believe so, though I confess I am still struggling to process all of this. He gestured at the fleet. A week ago we were alone and dying. Now we have an armada at our backs. It does not seem real. It's real, Maria assured him. Very real. The Admiral doesn't make promises she can't keep. I am beginning to understand that. Maria reached into her bag and pulled out a large container. Here, I wanted to give you this before you leave. Al accepted the container, feeling its weight. What is it? Coffee enough to last you a few months. Consider it a gift from Earth. He felt something that might have been emotion. Gratitude, certainly, but also something deeper, something that spoke of connections formed and friendships begun. I do not know how to thank you, he admitted, for the repairs, for the fleet, for everything. Maria smiled. Just remember us kindly, and hey, if you ever need help again, you know where to find us. The departure came an hour later. The quiet passage took its place at the heart of the human formation, surrounded by warships on all sides. Captain Starling was nearby, maintaining its position as escort and protector. As the fleet began to move, accelerating toward the edge of the solar system and the long journey ahead, Al looked back at Earth one last time. The small blue planet hung in the darkness, beautiful and fragile and strong. Around it, more ships continued their eternal patrol, guarding against threats known and unknown. Stations gleamed in the sunlight. Shuttles moved between them like busy insects. It was a world that had learned to defend itself. But more than that, it was a world that had learned to care about others. Al did not know what would happen when they reached the nebula. He did not know if they would fight or flee. He did not know what the future held for his people or for the strange, wonderful humans who had come to their aid. But he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer alone. And that, he thought, as the stars stretched into lines and the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, made all the difference. End of Part 1.